Thank you for chatting with me today. First off, I just want to say congratulations on this amazing series about about the first police women in Mexico. Like, it's just such an incredible story. I've learned so much. I wanted to ask you, how important is it for these stories to be told?
Well, I think that there are certain stories from our past that can teach us lessons towards our future, and I think that these stories can either make us feel good about how far we've come, but it can also depress us about how little we've done to change. And I think that we won't know until we sort of explore them honestly. And I think this story has a little bit of both, because on one side, it's a story about triumph and it's a story about overcoming adversity. It's a story about the first female police department in Mexico who, even though they were invited under false pretenses that they were going to come join the police, but it was actually a publicity stunt to distract people from a serial killer. These women stayed and carried out an investigation and really earned their place in the police. And I think it's no accident, and it's also because I don't believe in coincidences, that now Mexico has just elected our first female president. And I think that there's a through line between these 2 points that cannot be ignored. But this story about the Azules lives in obscurity. Like, nobody in Mexico knows about it. There's not a single statue. There's not a museum exhibit. These women haven't been, decorated with medals or applauses or parades. And I think that perhaps this is my version of a parade for them.
No, seriously. I've been a news reporter for 8 years and I cover a lot of Latin stories. And when I read the description of this series and I saw what it was about, it blew my mind because I my mind didn't even go there. Like, of course, what about the first police women in Mexico? Like, that's just such an important topic, I feel like, and it's not talked about enough. How did the story come about with you? Can you relate to it in any way, or how did it come about?
Yeah, well, a friend of mine who's a writer and co-writer in the series, he talked to me about the very first female police department in Mexico, which was in the 30s, and it
Mhm.
never materialized. Like, it was an attempt, but it ended up not doing anything. And we sort of started digging a little bit deeper, and we found this like 50-year anniversary for the first female police department. It was just like a tiny news article,
Mm.
and we started to dig a little deeper, and we ended up through the police. A guy in the police knew a guy who knew one of the members of the first female police department. So we called her,
Wow.
and we called her up, and she was nice enough to meet and have many conversations with us. And she introduced us to everybody. And she told us all
Wow.
about it. And any picture that we've seen, medals, badges, log books, everything is stuff that she has in her garage, because really, there was no attempt to make this a bigger story than it was, by the government. And I think that was a mistake, because even though the story may make the government look bad because what they tried to do, I think it's also a story that really paints the picture of a government that underestimated these women and opened the doors for them, not expecting that they would absolutely change the landscape. And I think that that's what happens anytime anybody underestimates anybody, right?
Mhm.
And when you do, you just let your guard down, and whoever you let in really has the power. So I think I'm a father of two teenage girls. I have a
Mm.
15-year-old and an 18-year-old,
Mm.
and my 18-year-old voted for the first time in these elections, and she couldn't believe that the presidential debate was between two women, and she couldn't believe it. Like, and Maria in 1971, she would never have believed it.
Mhm.
So I think, I guess the lesson for my daughter is, if Maria couldn't believe the life you're living now, imagine the life your daughter's going to live in 30 years. So let's help build that.
Wow, I love that. There were so many messages in this piece. Like I saw that the whole cast and crew were even Latin. Love that. How important is it to have that representation, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera? And was there any intention there?
Absolutely. Like I'll tell you, like for many decades, we grew up in Mexico thinking that we would never reach the quality of American television or American film. And we always thought that our shows would be a little bit, and we always sort of blamed budgets and we blamed a lot of things. But I think that something changed with the incoming streaming platforms and the globalization of stories, where an Apple TV Plus will come to Mexico and say, let's make a show together. And you pitch them a show like this that you think they're not going to like it. I mean, it's a Mexican show in Spanish about women cops. Like, what would Apple find interesting about that? And Apple's like, keep it in Spanish, keep it, with a Mexican cast, with a Mexican crew, tell the story as big as you need to. And here are the resources, and here's our screen. And I think that it's really interesting because we've quickly improved in such a way that I believe that the stories we're telling now are on a quality level. I think they're just as good as any show from any country in the world. And finally, I guess audiences can judge a story by a story and not necessarily whether the sound is right or whether the lighting is kind of irregular,
Yeah, and it just makes more sense, Latin stories coming from Latin people. No one else is telling the narrative. I love that.